I'd like to call the meeting to order.
It's a long way.
October 13th meeting of the Lancaster EDA. First, I'd like to call roll. Mr. Rice?
Here.
Mr. Sanford? Here. Mr. Sapersky?
Here.
Mr. Carter here. Vice Chairman? Here.
Charlotte Silverman is here.
And Mr. Wright. And Mr. Laws? Here. So we have a quorum. Glenn, do we have anybody coming in by Zoom? Not yet. Okay. I know that Taryn had said that she might not be able to make the meeting today. Got a few things to cover today. I'd asked Sharon Phillips, we had gotten together a little while ago, and Sharon is the new EDA director for the town of Kilmarnock. And I asked her if she would come and give a little presentation on what's going on and introduce herself. And
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
good morning.
Thank you. I appreciate your time this morning. I'm Sharon Phillips. I am the Economic Development Coordinator for the town of Kilmarnock. I've been with them just a few brief weeks now, so I'm still kind of getting my bearings. Roy and I had just kind of discussed just a brief introduction of myself and just a few of the things that are going on in the town of Kilmarnock. The town of Kilmarnock recently did a facade grant, a facade refreshment grant, which was actually a very successful program. And that program allowed businesses to, as many of you have probably seen, as you come down Main Street in Kilmarnock, there are tons of fresh new faces on the businesses. Lots of paint, structural renovations to the businesses. That program involved 37 applications that were approved. Town council approved $78,000 worth of grant money, and it generated upwards of $200,000 in private investment. I'm just impressed. I think it was just an impressive program, and the businesses have responded to it tremendously, and I think that we're even hearing lots of positive comments from shoppers in town as well. So anything to beautify the economic hub, if you will, of the Northern Neck. As far as new businesses in Kilmarnock, I think that we have lots of interesting and exciting new businesses to chat about. Of course, Domino's Pizza has the adage is when a big box retailer comes to Main Street, your Main Street has arrived. Domino's is on the backside of West Church Street, which should provide an incredible opportunity to draw shoppers down what otherwise was probably not one of the most trafficked streets in Kilmarnock of recent. So the addition of Domino's on West Church Street is a plus for those businesses. Yesterday, their ovens are up and running, and they are training their staff. So if you follow them on Facebook, you might find that window of opportunity. Yesterday, between 4 and 5, they had free pizzas, so that they can just allow their staff to learn and grow. So we have Domino's, we have Amazon. Amazon is in the old Peebles complex. They have taken up that space. If you have any questions about Amazon, let me know. There is Donna's Restaurant, which is on Main Street. There's a virtual golf that is coming to town. In the future, they have filed the paperwork, but they have not broken ground. There will be an auto spa in front of Walmart. So that will be an interesting expansion. Did you have a question? I have no idea what that is.
An auto spa, so in Gloucester, down by the Cookout, that tremendous car wash facility.
Very nice car wash.
Very nice car wash.
I figured that I have something to do with that.
It's kind of a boutique car wash, if you will. So that will be going in front of the Walmart. So that's an interesting addition to town. Of course, everyone is very excited about Starbucks. They have not broken ground yet, but Starbucks is on the horizon as well. There's a couple of other smaller retailers that are there. Of course, I'm learning to work with the chamber, not learning to work, we are partnering with the chamber so that we can leverage everyone to elevate all of the businesses. As far as just community things going on, Candy for Kids will be October the 30th. The town of Kilmarnock is dressed for fall, so I think the town is actually very attractive at this time. Does anybody have any questions for me? Charlotte?
Question. So
first of all, very exciting, and yeah, I think congratulations to the area and to all the hard work that I'm sure has been, going on behind the scenes to make this happen. I was wondering if there would be any type of, either led by the chamber or, kind of like an introduction to all these businesses for the community, so that maybe we can come out and, I don't know, sample a little bit of pizza or have a little bit of coffee or, whatever, or have our car washed or whatever it is. But, just to kind of like introducing them to the community so that everybody knows that they're there and where they are.
So we have a package, we have a program that we're working on, and it does utilize mostly social media.
Okay.
But whether it is on the town's economic development page or the town's Facebook page, there are 2 Facebook pages for the town. One that is, we just recently merged a couple of them. We found that they were just kind of confusing, if you will. The dog park and then the Scotty's Park and then the actual dog Facebook page. So we recently merged them into 2 more purposeful pages. One to communicate strictly town government business, and one to focus solely on community development and economic development. So check us out there. And so with Domino's, she is a very strong business owner and very successful, and she's doing a fantastic job on her own. At this point, if we were to assist, it may just confuse. We certainly don't want to overwhelm them. Yesterday, they were lined up out the door waiting for pizza, and if we had used social media to elevate that, it might have been overwhelming for them. So, but as far as the other businesses go, we are working with each business, or I'm working with each business uniquely for when the timing is right for them. We are still obviously dealing with COVID, and some of the restaurants and some of the businesses are a little shy at this point, a little reluctant to just throw the doors open. They want to make sure that they're keeping their staff and their constituents safe and healthy. So those are still concerns that are going on. And if you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see, personally, I'd like to see a picture with the mayor and the mayor grabbing that first slice of pizza, the mayor grabbing that first cup of coffee from Starbucks. So to get the community leaders involved as well, I think that would be impactful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good.
Gentlemen, anything
Sharon,
else?
I've got a question about Amazon. Is that going to be mostly a pickup and return spot if you?
So that is an Amazon last mile. And at this time, Amazon it is a fairly unique business model for Amazon. It is considered a last mile. There are 3 slated, Warsaw, Louisa, and Kilmarnock. At this time, Kilmarnock is the only one functioning, the only one that's up and operational. So the semi comes to the back of the building, they offload the semi, what they call kit that out. They put those packages, parcels onto pallets, and then, so there's 3 levels of employment. They have key holder level, assistant managers, and then they have what they call flex workers, and then the 3rd level would be the drivers, and that is an outsourced. Those employees are not Amazon employees. I think Amazon will be an amazing partner for the community. After 90 days of employment, Amazon will pay for your college tuition entirely.
Wow.
In this community, I think that's impactful.
How many jobs did they bring in?
The 2 key holders, there's 2 key holder positions, and then what they refer to as the flex position. The flex position varies. Because it is a last mile station, it's not a consistent amount of freight that comes in through that back door, it's rather cyclic. So they will staff in 4-day shifts. And what makes it a fairly unique business model is it's not 9 to 5, it's not 7 to 3. At this time, and again, I think Amazon is smart enough to be fluid. They know what they're doing. At this time, they are looking at 8 to 12 is where those flex hours and those key holders would be moving that merchandise off of the freight at the back door onto those pallets and kits. So those staffing numbers vary, but I think that they were looking between 20 and 25.
Wow.
I have one broad question to ask you. How do you envision your position working with our board?
Working with your board, that is a fantastic question. I think that there are lots of things on the horizon for both the county and the towns that are all within the county and the Northern Neck as a whole. I don't know that I have a definitive step A, step B, but I think that the workings that are going on have to kind of come a little more into the public view before, I don't know how to say that. There's things going on in the county, and in my new role, I don't know.
Michael, I'd say to that, as far as that economic development group that I'm reporting on later, Susan from the town is part of that group.
Yes.
So she's integrating.
Right, and the
county
county's
initiatives with
looking to
county
hire an
initiatives and
assistant.
where possible.
Sorry, didn't mean to
There's
stumble at
integration.
that.
It was just an on-the-spot question. She handled it quite well.
Yeah, I apologize for stumbling. The county's looking to hire, and I just wasn't sure what all was eligible for me to talk on.
Well, Sharon, you've been in the area for a while. You were with Irvington
I was.
for how long?
I was fortunate, I was very fortunate. I had the opportunity to serve as both the clerk and the treasurer for the town of Irvington for 4 years.
Yeah.
And that was, in addition to the clerk and the treasurer roles, I truly enjoyed the opportunity to work with the businesses. And that's kind of where I was able to transfer my skills for the town of Kilmarnock.
Good. Any more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Let us know how we can help you. At our last meeting, we had a number of grant requests, and I have followed up on a couple of those. I was just going to give you an update. One cracked yoke, that was Dale Ross. He had come to us to get some money, hopefully for a generator. He is a mobile food trucks specializing in breakfasts, and I just talked to him yesterday. He has gotten the equipment that he needs. He's certainly got the generator, and he is putting the word out there now, and I know he's gotten a job with Ranson Nursery has hired him for a function. Tractor Supply has hired him. He's looking at 3 different locations in the Kilmarnock area to locate, so he's up and running and is real positive about things. Andre Ashley of Northern Neck Fitness, I've been keeping up with him fairly regularly, and have talked to Susan Cockrell and also Sharon about Andre, and he has the money in the bank. His own personal equity is going to be going into it. He's looking at 2 locations right now in Kilmarnock. His agent has put in a request actually for one of them, which is right at the corner of Irvington Road and Route 3 and Main Street. That location's been empty for quite some time. He is meeting with his agent and also with the landowner, hopefully today. They were supposed to meet yesterday to look at that property. He's also looking at one other location in the Lancaster area in Kilmarnock and one in Warsaw. So we hope to land him here, but he is making progress. As far as Brand Me, Don, do we know if they are still in business?
I do not believe that they are.
I think the last time we had a meeting here, not of the EDA, but of the Citizens Business Advisory Group, I saw everything going out of that building into a truck. So I think that $500 that we had allotted to them will probably be going back to our treasury.
So
And I
it was
will.
never dispersed.
No, the check was written, but I could never locate the folks to hand it to them.
Yes.
So,
And we did have 2 that were tabled. Of course, one was Andre Ashley, and the other is Claiborne Dingledine, who is here today to give us an update on the sail and surf. So, Claiborne, you've got the floor.
Good morning, thanks for having me back. My name's Claiborne Dingledine. I am the owner and captain of Sail and Surf Adventures. We're a sailing charter company out of Weems, Virginia. We do sunset cruises, half-day sails, brunch cruises, things like that for folks who are visiting and local to the area. So you guys saw my grant proposal from last time. Just some updates. Business has gone really well since then. I launched in June. I was here in July, and I've sent out some updated profit and loss statements that you guys should have. But I had made some projections for this year and for next year, and I've more than doubled my projections for next year already. So things have gone really well. I've worked with the Small Business Development Center out of the University of Mary Washington to develop a business strategy for me to transition next year into this as a full-time job. And so I've started going to the Irvington Farmers Market and setting up there and trying to really get the word out in the community that way, as well as digital marketing and things like that. So my grant proposal is essentially the same. I'm looking to replace the inboard diesel engine on the sailing vessel that I use for the charters. And yeah, are there any questions?
Where will you be located this winter? Will you be taking the charter business south, or?
No, I'll be here. The boat will go into the yard, and I'll be doing the work over the winter. Yeah, so
Okay.
we'll close up November 1st. I have charters all the way till the 30th right now, the 31st actually, and then we'll launch again charters starting March 1st. So we'll take those 3 months to do work and repairs on the boat.
Where do you keep your boat?
Carter's Cove Marina
At Carter's
in
Cove?
Weems. Yeah.
So I'm looking at the profit and loss worksheet here. And, you know, as you said, you know, things have, you've done, you know, got a lot of income coming in. How many more, so you have 3,500 approximately for September, up until September 23rd here, total income. How many charters does that represent? So if you tell me how many actual trips?
Yeah, that's a
know?
really good question. I don't know the answer to that. The sales vary because a 4-hour trip is almost twice as much as a 2-hour trip. But
Right,
I've been averaging 4 to 6 charters a week during that time, during September,
okay,
from late August all the way through till about now.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the capacity? What do you see
I
as kind of like?
advertise up to 4 guests at a time. I have 4 cushioned seats that I can take, but I can take up to 6 people, and I just give them the caveat, especially if they have to ask, and I'll say, yes, we can take up to 6. That's what my license and insurance covers, but they'll have to sit up on the cabin top where there's no cushioned seats.
But that's the same price, right?
No, I charge extra.
You charge extra
Yeah,
for that?
$50 extra per person.
So how many, what's your capacity for, like, how many charters do you see you're gonna be able to do in a week, for instance? What's your max?
10.
10, okay.
Yeah.
So you're like halfway there approximately.
Yeah, and I'm really working, I'm under contract with my digital marketing consultant to start up again next spring to keep working, pushing that. I'll do the farmers market. I'm looking into going into the Heathville and Urbana farmers markets as well to continue promoting. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention is I've had folks come from Chesapeake, Virginia through the social media and digital marketing. They've found out Richmond, and they come to the community specifically to do this charter. And then they ask me, you know, where can we get a good bite to eat? Where can we have dinner? So I'm able to kind of refer out more business to the community, which is kind of a cool thing for me.
And is that something that you would be then maybe networking or make links on your website or anything like that to some of the local
Yeah, and I
businesses?
have some already on my website, but I will expand that as things continue, as the partnerships continue to interweave themselves.
Any other questions?
Are there any competitors around?
Yeah, Premier Sailing offers something similar. I think we occupy different market niches. They're much more geared towards education, learning how to sail and things like that.
Yeah.
They do offer charters and cruises, but their boats aren't as comfortable as mine, and we just market differently. They're much more learn how to sail, and I'm much more come get out on the water, you know, enjoy being on a sailboat.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
thank you.
And if I can add onto that information, I don't know if everybody's aware here, but Premier Sailing is for sale.
Yeah.
So that business is currently up for sale. And I don't know what the future of that will be at this point.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recuse myself from the discussion on this, on this application, as the boatyard is probably going to be involved one way or the other with this. Just would like to make that part of the record.
Okay. Mr. Dingledine, we normally vote on the grant request later in the meetings. So your grant request was for how much?
$10,000.
10,000, and the motor and the work you're going to be doing, you said was
Estimated 25,000 total.
25,000.
Mhm.
Okay, good. Good. Well, thank you for your presentation.
Great, thanks
We
so
will,
much.
we will let you know.
Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you.
There was one other grant request that we got at the last meeting, and we gave them money, and that was Mike Stevens at Gander Design in Lively. And I've talked to him and actually went up to his building, and he has done quite a bit of work. He said he couldn't do the concrete work until the weather had changed, and he's at that point now. I've seen that there are borders that have been put up and concrete that's been broken up, and he plans in November or later this month to complete the project that he'd come to us for. So he's making good progress, and I think that's great for the community and also for the entrance to the northern neck from the north. It's a big improvement for that area. So next on the agenda, Jeff Sapersky is going to give us an update on the CBRAC committee. That's the Community Business Relations Advisory Committee.
Great. Thank you. I think since our last meeting, we've had one meeting, and what we did is we decided to, where you know this, rather than go straight to the Board of Supervisors with our plan, we went through an additional iteration, and Don supported this with the entire Board of Supervisors. We had a working session to talk about our work today, and then had good interchange with the full board, going back and forth of what it did encompass, what it didn't encompass, what was already in process, what needed to be put forward. And so right now, we with some tweaks to that, we have another meeting next Wednesday, a week from today, to finalize it before we go to the Board of Supervisors for full approval. So that's the stage, isn't that correct? That's the stage we're at. It still is just the primary components. Now, the next steps are to take the primary components, which I'll relate to you in a sec, and then build out what each of those details of what each of those means. But the primary pillars of the plan are broadband, which I think most of you know is already being covered and is well on its own way. The second is a pillar of affordable housing. We need affordable housing. We're very careful the way we worded it. It's not just low to moderate income housing. It's not just workforce housing. It's just affordable housing across the spectrum, even though we need both aspects of that. The third is making economic development a priority at the county, and that would be staffing related and accountabilities, and as much as Don probably don't want to hear it, there are probably some budgetary aspects to that too. The fourth is education. I think we recognize in that education, we have to have a good education system if we expect people to not only come here, but to stay here with their families, and also to retain workforce from our educational system, that they don't feel compelled to have to relocate elsewhere. Recreation, a little more formalized strategy on that. Of the asset we have is the natural resources and all that stuff. How do we leverage that strength that a lot of communities just don't have, that we do have, that we probably don't leverage to the extent we can?
Jeff,
Yes.
just to follow up on that last point about recreation, does that include like targeted marketing and so on and so forth, or is it, what do you mean by recreation?
Well, recreation would be like the examples that are just, there's nothing finalized under that, but like that Tri-Way Trail.
Yep.
Get that Tri-Way Trail up and going, have better public access to the water. We have some around the county, but nothing
So it's
that's really.
twofold, it's infrastructure, and then it's like getting the word out there to people for them to use it.
Correct. I mean, we got to walk before we run. So
Yeah,
I don't think, other than, well, Claiborne's not here anymore, stuff like that. And business supporting recreation in our county. We talked about, if someone came into the county and wanted to rent a kayak just to go out with their family, where would they even go?
Well, yep.
Just the fundamental stuff. So recreation, but there's more to be built out under that. But the thought is, the attraction to people outside, but also recreation for residents, that, there's a more formalized approach to it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I understand, yep.
6 is creating a business-friendly environment. That can go any which way, just so this group knows, one of the thoughts under that was an EDA grant program. So that directly hits us. We would clearly be square in the middle of that as an EDA. And then the 7th, and I don't like the way it's worded because it confuses me every time, but it's public education. I think one of the pillars is, this has nothing to do with our education system. The point is, I think the county and the committee and all parties who are involved in this at the subcommittee level have to make sure the residents of our county understand why this is an economic imperative. It's not like, I'm retired, I don't need to worry about the school system. Just the pervasive things. We need to educate on the long-term implications, really not to be glass half empty, but the long-term implications of failure to execute against this plan is not good. And so there are fundamental reasons why we need to do this plan for the long-term health and viability of the county. But that's, when it says public education, that's the part that they're talking about as to, we can't just write it, put it on a shelf, assign accountabilities, because that's when Don and the Board of Supervisors will get blowback from an uninformed public and go, what in the heck are you doing? Why are you spending money on this? Or why are y'all taking this initiative? So that's probably one of the more important pillars that we want to make sure did not get overlooked. Yes, ma'am.
What about environmental impacts on this particular area? And I would imagine that could potentially be under, what did you have there? Public education, both when it comes to, and for lack of better words, garbage, trash. We've heard this as numerous Board of Supervisors meetings where people come in and they're very upset about all the litter that's on the road, right? I mean, so that's part of an public education type of thing. Obviously, because it detracts, from people wanting to come here if it's going to be littered everywhere. But there's also a lot of things happening when it comes to the coastal resiliency, impact from, potential weather coming in and so on and so forth. And I'm just wondering, is part of it, because it impacts the economic situation?
I guess my short answer to that, Charlotte, is one is we did not talk about that. Second is I'm not sure that even though it's clearly under the umbrella of the things the county needs to be concerned with, it's not under this umbrella.
Okay,
in my mind.
it's not, okay, it's
Does that
covered
make
somewhere
sense?
else. Fantastic.
That makes sense?
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely, thank you.
And so that's my short report, Mr. Chair, unless there are any questions. So right now, hopefully, once we get the Board of Supervisors, we will have a Roth skeleton that we will need to build out with subcommittees and greater community involvement.
And when is the plan to have this in place? Because we don't want to have 10 years on the road.
It's going to take at least a couple more meetings, I think.
Yeah.
Right,
So,
but by summer 2022?
Oh, I
Can we
think, yeah.
count
I
on
think
that?
so,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I would hope so.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
I will have lost patience by then if we don't.
Well, I mean, it's been a while, right? So it's
But,
just,
it's hard to get all of those folks together, just like, when you call a meeting, to try to bring all those people together
well,
to
it's about
find time.
priority.
Yeah.
It's about priority, and
it's tough.
this is a priority, and it's been for a long time.
Mhm.
So it's about, getting it in place.
I think it's, the ball's moving down the field. I'm very optimistic about it.
Good.
Making good progress.
Awesome.
Paul Shakatano gave a nice talk to the Board of Supervisors about what's been going on with all of our meetings. And there was some very good press in the Rappahannock Record about, it's probably a month ago, Jeff?
Mhm.
And we got about, almost a full page, including what was on the front and then in the inside of the paper. So
Right.
a lot of information went out to the public that way also.
Yeah, and that, you're touching on a really, really, really good point. And I don't want to take up any more time than necessary here, but communication, and I think in our last meeting with Jay Wolfsons, we're here talking about, public access to the water and wasn't aware of that we actually do have some. And the problem is the communication out to, the community. whether, you know, the newspaper is definitely one option, but is this something that also need to be considered? And I don't know if it's part of the CBRAC type of comprehensive plan, or if it's part of the county, but communication out to, and I think we experienced that during the CARES funds distribution. We do need to have a better way to communicate out to the counties to be able to reach people, because we're not very good at that sometimes.
I mean, we do, you know, put stuff on our website. We also now have a county Facebook page through our EMS department. And so, you know, we're working on that.
Yeah, well, it's good. It's good. I mean, it's just something to kind of jot down there and keep track of.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously we haven't filled out all the boxes yet, Charlotte, but I think the thought of the public education would be a lot more personal approach, like speaking at Rotary clubs, speaking at
sure,
church. I mean,
sure,
really just try to
sure.
really push the information out rather than post it and hope people will find it.
Well, I think we need to do both.
Right,
I
yeah,
think
we
we
will
need to do
definitely do
both.
both. We're
Yeah.
already doing one. I think
Yeah.
that we see a more proactive approach on communication.
Yeah, maybe you're
when
right.
we- but
Maybe you're right.
Once we have something coalesced to talk about, I think we don't want to do it right now until we have
Right.
things battened down a
Yeah.
little bit better.
I'm thinking also in general, but it certainly applies to what you're talking about as
Yeah.
well, right?
Next on the agenda, Don, can you give us any update? Have we, I know we've been advertising for county economic,
Well, we haven't advertised yet. As you know, the board wrote into their FY '22 budget, approved a assistant county administrator position, which the primary focus would be for economic development. I've been looking at different jobs descriptions for several months and found nothing that would, you know, could come from somewhere else and fit in right here. It needed to be more specific. And as I've sat in on these CBRAC meetings, and I've talked with Jason Bellows and Bill Lee, who are the two board members who sit on that committee, it seems like that committee is basically writing a specific job description for this position for Lancaster. So that's kind of what I'm waiting on, is that blueprint that Jeff spoke of to be specific to Lancaster County for that position. And I don't see it as much of a time crunch as it was, say, you know, 4 or 5 months ago, because now the town of Kilmarnock, where all the hub of the businesses are in the county, that position has been filled with Sharon. So, you know, we've got some help in that regard right now. So that's basically my plan. The board members, at least 2 of them, agree with that approach. So that's the way we're going to handle that. So once that blueprint is in place, I feel like we'll have a very specific job description, at least until 2035, and say, this is what we want. You know, the broad initiative, as Paul has stated, is to increase the population of 20 to 55-year-olds in the county. Here are the goals and objectives of how CBRAC and the Board of Supervisors envisions this happening. And so here's your marching orders, you know, go to it. So that's where we're at with that.
And is there a target date for when you want to have that person in place?
I would say by the first of the year, I'll be a whole lot closer than what I am right now. Just a couple of things that you touched on, Charlotte, talking about litter, because I know you've attended several board meetings, and that has been a hot topic. The county is going to fund its own litter pickup in the February-March timeframe. We're working with VDOT, and the VDOT is going to you know, handle it logistically, but the county's going to fund that extra pickup right before the spring vegetation, you know, starts getting going. And as far as coastal resiliency and environmental concerns, you know, that there are some behind-the-scenes things going on with that. There's a group called RAFT that is working with all of the localities, and those issues would be handled through our planning and land use department.
Don, Michael and I were talking about website, economic development website, and we decided to sort of table that until we get this new position. And because we'd like to work with that person, with Sharon, and other people, just to come up with something, you know, consensus of what we feel like we could have on that website. And we're also hoping that the county will help fund that website too, since it might be advantageous for that. Okay, next, we have a public hearing, the Mariners Museum refunding. The procedure for a public hearing for the bond financing, the chairman, I announced this is a public hearing for refunding the bond financing for the Mariners Museum. The hearing has been properly advertised. Dan Siegel is going to introduce this item to the board and summarize why the EDA is being asked to issue the refunding bond for the financing. Let's see, Kevin White also, and any representatives from the Mariners Museum can summarize the highlights. But Dan, can you give the?
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I'll give a quick presentation and then turn it over to Kevin White. Is this on?
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll get a little closer to this. So we've had this bond issue out there for, I guess, since 2012, and we did a modification, I don't know if y'all remember, in 2019. And there's some, and I'm sure all of y'all are probably familiar with the Mariners Museum in Newport News. It's a wonderful facility. Newport News doesn't have the bank qualification designation, which is the magic tax designation that makes this a particularly attractive bond issue. So they're coming to Lancaster County again. There are changes to how they want to structure this. Town Bank is going to be about buying the bond. Kevin White is here as their bond counsel, and he can explain that if you want more detail. But that required under federal law a new public hearing, where normally you wouldn't necessarily need a public hearing for refunding. And so that's why we're having the public hearing at this point. The bond issue is going to be not in excess of $6 million, I think is what is advertised, is properly advertised. We have a affidavit of publication. The bond resolution that you have before you takes care of that public hearing part of it and does the approvals, but it also approves the form of the bond and the bond purchase and loan agreement. So there won't be a need for a second meeting, which often is necessary. We're doing it all in one meeting. And if you'd like, Mr. Chairman, Mr. White's here, that he could explain any more as well. So.
Okay.
Morning.
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 Thanks, Dan, for the introduction. I'm Kevin White with Butler Snow Law Firm in Richmond, Virginia. Represent Town Bank in this matter, and Mariners Museum has asked me to appear at this meeting to describe what they're doing with the bank. As Dan mentioned, there's an outstanding bond that was issued in 2012 by this authority for the benefit of the Mariners Museum. The proceeds of that bond originally went to building out the USS Monitor Center exhibit at the Mariners Museum in Newport News. It has a replica of the USS Monitor, Civil War ironclad, as well as artifacts and exhibits. So that bond was issued in 2012 and sold to SunTrust Bank for a rate at that time that was about 2.7%. When the federal tax rate increased, because this is a tax-exempt bond, there were provisions in the bond that increased the rate to keep the bank's rate of return the same. So the rate now is 3.2%. Town Bank has given a term sheet to fix a rate for 15 years of 2.17%. So it's a very good debt service savings for Mariners Museum. The reason for a new public hearing is because when you have a tax-exempt bond like this issued through an authority, the federal tax law requires a public hearing whenever you either add new money, which we're not doing, or if you increase the average maturity or bump out the last payments on the loan. So here we're doing that. It moves the final maturity from 2027 to 2036. So that's the technical reason for having to have another public hearing and another Board of Supervisors resolution. The resolution before you, in the whereas clauses describes what we're doing, which I think Dan and I have done a fairly adequate job of doing. But you can ask any questions. It also, so the resolution has a lot of the information in it, and then it would ask you to approve being the issuer of that bond again. It's really a new bond, but it's essentially the same deal as it was with better terms. You would agree to be the qualified small issuer, which Dan alluded to the bank qualification. A small issuer is a authority with the county together, not issuing more than $10 million in tax-exempt bonds for the calendar year, so calendar year 2021. And I understand that this authority is in that category. And so that's why we come here instead of go to Newport News, because Newport News is not a qualified small issuer. So this resolution would have you approve being the issuer again, signing the bond purchase and loan agreement, which essentially is a loan agreement between the bank and the borrower, but includes you as the party since you issued the bond. Authorizes your chairman or vice chairman to sign certain other certificates. There's an information return that we prepare that goes to the IRS that has to be signed by the chairman. And then several paragraphs of the resolution talk about how there's limited liability of the authority. This is really an obligation of the borrower passing through you. It's not an obligation of the county or the authority at all. And the directors are indemnified, the county is indemnified by the borrower. So that's a high-level summary of this resolution, and happy to answer any questions you may have. Yes?
Okay, so and bear with me so that I can follow what you're talking about here. So really, we're extending the deadline out.
Yes.
And what I was trying to find when I was reading through this is that, is there any difference in the revenue that would be
The
obtained
fee.
by the EDA?
No, it's the same fee.
So it's the same fee?
Yes.
So all it is basically is we're extending, because I couldn't see if there was a difference in percentage or different in total amount or what it was.
It's more, you're right, it's more fee because it's going to go for a longer period.
Okay, so it's actually more fee, okay. I was trying to see if there was a change in percentage or not, but you're saying
No,
that we're just extending out from 2027 to 20, what was it? 37, something like that.
Yes, the section 9 of the resolution at the end of that
Mhm.
talks about what the fee is, which is a 1/8 of 1%, of the
Right.
outstanding principal amount of the bond each year.
Right,
And so that's what it is now as well. And
okay,
as
so
Dan,
that's not changing.
that's correct. And as
Okay.
Dan said, because the principal will amortize slower because it's a longer maturity, that fee
Right.
may be a bit
That makes perfect
higher
sense.
for a long
Okay,
time.
thank you for explaining that, I appreciate it.
Dan, this is a question for you, I think, since the 9.6 million already went out under our authority under the 10, does this count as a new issuance that goes against this year's 10 million?
It does count as a new issue against this year's, but
Okay.
then in 2022, so January 1, you have another 10 million.
Yeah.
So you're right, but we talked about it, there's not really any other bonds that are planned between
Nothing from the
Now,
county done?
the end of the year,
Okay.
so the county's clear. That's a good question.
Good, thank you.
One good thing is the federal BQ year is the calendar year, and, Virginia is on a June 30, so your fiscal year isn't shot, by doing this.
Since this is a public hearing, I need to ask Glenn, has anybody from the public signed in to this? So we have any more comments from the board? Any questions? Okay, so we close the public hearing is now closed. Are there any other questions that we have? We need to, we've reviewed the resolution, and do I hear a motion on the floor to adopt this resolution?
I put a motion on the floor to approve.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been brought to the floor, it's been seconded. Any questions, discussion? Okay, all
Need
in
a roll
favor,
call.
make known by saying aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, we need a roll call vote for this.
A roll call?
Yeah,
Okay.
each member.
Good. Well, let's go ahead and start with Mr. Rice. You-
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Resolution's been passed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Dan.
Welcome.
Okay. Next on the agenda, old business. Michael Laws will be presenting. He had come up with the
Financial status report?
financial status report. Sorry.
I thought you were rearranging the agenda there.
I
Oh.
forgot my glasses this
Okay.
morning, so bear with me.
Before I get into that, I'd just like to add that, you know, you all have asked me several times, how do we obtain more bond issuances? And I always throw the name Dan Siegel out, and that he's the only one that I know of who can bring bond issuances to us. So, Dan, they've asked me several times, you know, how do we get more? So I'm going to pose that question to you and just tell you that I know you love Lancaster County, so when bond issuances come across your desk, keep us in mind, so.
What is that market like now, Dan?
Well, you know, the rates are so low right now, so that people are issuing bonds, and there's money out there, and there's everybody wants tax-exempt bonds at the moment, too. The reason why it's sort of weird how you can attract this, it's sort of a cottage industry, right? Because there's not many, you really have to be a small locality to have that bank qualification be useful. So you're really looking for deals from, you know, larger urban areas that can't use it, that are normally nonprofits, and so they'll come. It's such a small group of lawyers that do this type of bond work, and so they know, I mean, at this point, they know after the last, 20 years of me doing this, that we represent a lot of rural localities, and so I'll get a call from the maybe 5 or 6 firms in Virginia saying, do you know of a locality that both has the ability to do bank qualified during this calendar year, what amount that might be, and do they have any other requirements, like does the county want to issue something? So is there really that much ability for a locality? So we kind of keep track of just internally, and of course we talk with the county administrator and the county's financial advisor to make sure there's nothing we missed, to make sure that you have that amount. But usually we get the call in midsummer to early fall because it's near the end of the year. If you get the call in January or February, unless you're really sure there's nothing going to happen, you kind of don't want to use up the county's ability to do financing, unless it's just a giant issue. Like if someone came to you and said, for whatever reason, they want to do 50 million or 100 million, then you might say, well, the county, you're just going to have to not do it this year, whatever. But so it's just a small market. It's a small group of lawyers that are involved with this. So it's really a word of mouth. They call and say, we've got one to do.
So, Is there any way of being a little bit more proactive and trying to like market disability a little bit more? And the other question I have is, can we do this outside of Virginia?
You can't do outside of Virginia. so-
Cannot do it outside.
Correct. Virginia only. And really, some bond lawyers take the position that, not all, that you have to have a nexus between the locality that's issuing the bond and the locality where the project is located.
Can you give me an example of that?
Well, for instance, in the Newport News
Uh-huh.
situation, the Mariners Museum, they feel like they also serve this area.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Where if someone in Southwest Virginia or Roanoke, they might go, well, I feel uncomfortable coming to, the Northern Neck to get my bond issue, because I'm not sure I really have a nexus with the Northern Neck.
Is that a requirement or just a psychological?
It depends on who you talk to. There are a couple of firms that think that that's part of the interpretation of the IRS regulations. I don't believe that's in their interpretation, and probably the majority of bond lawyers agree with me, but there are some that think that, and so they wouldn't necessarily come to the Northern Neck. But to otherwise answer your question, there's no one really to market except for the bond lawyers, because they're the ones who are sort of figuring out
Okay.
where they're the ones who have to figure out where you can issue a bank qualified. So I'm not sure there's a real benefit to doing any kind of marketing.
Well, I'm thinking more being proactive and trying to go out and find people that are, that
Yeah.
are looking for this, so that it's not just kind of a haphazard, and that way, the EDA here would get a little bit more control
Right.
over the funds coming in, rather than kind of like
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any
Yeah.
problem with you doing that. I just don't know what
yeah.
it will do beyond the 5 or 6 bond lawyers that already know.
Well, you have to have a target audience, and that's the problem here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any, similar to Mariners Museums, are there any existing issuances who might want to lower the rate and extend in this environment? That, we just did it for theirs. Are there others that meet that criteria?
Oddly, I haven't heard of that many this year. I really would have expected it, but there were a lot of modifications done, like we did in 2019 and 20, where they have, some have lowered rates. But I would have expected more, just like you're saying. I know Kevin and I are working on another bond issue for a nursing home facility and nonprofit in the Henrico area. And the bank just lowered the rate, and they were able to go to the current issuer, which in that case was the city of Poquoson, and get it lowered without, it fit the rules that allowed it to do a lower rate without a public hearing.
Yeah.
So they didn't have to go somewhere else. They didn't have to find new bank qualified. Yeah. But if they did, this would be a place we'd send them. Exactly. And also there's a difference. I think what's really good, and what I tell other lawyers is, Lancaster's interested in doing this. There are some localities where there might be an EDA member or two, or a board member that says, well, I don't want to do that. This seems dangerous, I don't want to, I'm not interested in this, so. Ms. Laws?
Being new to the board, is the bond we just issued for Mariners Museum the only one we have
No,
outstanding?
no, we've got, currently we have 3 others that are on the books. There's one with Bishop Catholic High School, Williamsburg Landing, and James Berry Robinson School.
Right. And that's basically the same group. They come here and they go, is there a locality that can do it? And the reason you like it, you probably have already figured this out, Mr. Thomas, but the authority fee that you get is 1/8 of 1% of the outstanding principal each year. So if there's $1 million, it's $1,250 they pay you every year. If it's 6 million, you know, whatever the math, maybe y'all are better at the math, but 7,500 or something like that. So it's like found money, and it's ridiculous that it exists, but just because of the weird IRS rules, it's allowable. So as long as this goes on, it's a great way to bring money in for economic development. Yeah.
And how competitive is our fee? Because, I mean, some of the things have come up that, you know, some places actually have no fee.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, because, I mean, that's another way of kind of like boosting that revenue if possible.
Yeah, so you can reduce it.
No, I'm not really interested in reducing it.
Yeah. There is one, for big bond issues, for like 30 to 50 to whatever million, something I think is really wrong is that the Virginia Small Business Financing Authority will do bond issues for, I think their fee is 1/10 of 1%, or some lower number. The city of Charlottesville, for instance, we work with, they have a sliding scale, so they have a fee that changes depending on the amount, and it goes down the higher the amount. So you can do those sorts of things. You're normally just seeing the under 10 million type facility. So most localities, as far as I know, everybody's got the 1/8 fee, and everybody I represent does the 1/8 fee in the northern neck of Middle Peninsula. And so there's, you know, I know you're not suggesting this, but I hate to see a race to the bottom, but you could do that.
No. I mean, and as far as the localities that are seeking this type of funding, what type of criteria do they need to meet?
I'm not sure I understand the
Like the
question.
Mariners Museum,
Right.
what type of business or what type of organization is that? And what type of criteria do they need to meet in order to?
Oh, to do this sort of bond issue?
Uh-huh.
They just have to be a 501c3.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay, because I mean, there's maybe a lot of 501c3s that doesn't really know that this type of funding
I mean,
potentially exists.
there's a lot of 501c3s that don't even know about tax exempt financing.
Right, so is that an area for potential
I mean,
marketing type of whatever? you
true.
wanna call
I
it?
mean, I guess you could do that, because then you're doing something to get them to go to the bond lawyers and
I don't know,
to
Jeff,
their
what do you
bank.
think of that?
I'm sorry, what?
Kind of making it, getting the word out there to 501c3s that this type of funding exists, because I mean.
You know, I think the best, I mean, that's a really good idea. I think the best way to do it, and I wish more banks like Chesapeake understands that,
Mhm.
but a lot of banks don't understand the bank qualified and 501c3 benefit for their customers. And so, I mean, I'd love to see that, like the Virginia Independent Bankers or something like that, do a program, because that's where they go to their banks.
'Cause I'm just thinking, I mean, if you're talking about, this is, and I will stop soon, I promise you.
But that's an industry-wide issue.
Yeah,
It
and I
wouldn't
mean,
be just
if we're
language.
talking about this being in Virginia, so up in DC, there must be a ton of nonprofit organizations that could benefit for something like this. And they might not even know that this capability exists, that we could kind of be able to work with.
Right.
I don't know, I mean, you know much better than I
I
do.
really don't, Charlotte. I guess the question I'd have, Dan, is, you know, for most of these, like the 501c3, given the cost of bond issuances and the differential between the bank qualified rate and the normal rate, it has to be a decent size issue for break even.
Right.
Correct.
We usually use between 750,000 to $1 million
That
is a
low?
minimum,
As a minimum, okay.
as a minimum.
Mhm.
Because then you can make it up you can make up the bond issuance cost in about 3 to 4 years,
Yeah,
which is, I mean, most loans, sometimes they'll get refinanced and everything. So 5 to 10 years is pretty long for a loan to stay the way it is. That's but I mean, you probably could do a better analysis of when it makes sense, but it's not that expensive. So let's say it's, you know, 50,000 total to do a bond issue.
Yeah.
But that includes the same kind of cost that you do in a regular loan too. So maybe the net is about 40,000.
Mhm.
So then you have to figure out how long does that take, how long does that interest cost? Reduction, how
Yeah.
long would it take to make up that? And I always guess 2 to 3 years is a great, if you can
Mhm.
do it in that time, then it's probably
That's
worth it, but
Pretty short,
otherwise,
yeah.
yeah.
You know, banks can issue tax exempt loans themselves without going through bonding
Who can,
process.
pardon?
We can issue tax exempt loans without going through a true, you know, EDA or a bond or something like that. So we don't do it that often because there are very few in our market that do that. But I guess second point is I could hook you up with, you know, Virginia Bankers Association from an educational perspective.
Yeah, just
They
for
do
that.
most of that stuff virtually now too anyway, so it's easy to get,
Yeah,
because, you know, banks are starving for.
right,
um,
for loans,
for
right,
loans, right,
good
yeah.
loans.
Mhm.
No, I think that'd be worthwhile for everybody
Right,
because it's going to help the nonprofits, it's going to help the banks.
yep,
They get to promote the loan, you know, saying you can do, it's more affordable.
yeah, especially in rural markets where there isn't critical mass that much, like, stuff like this comes around once in a blue moon, so no bank really pays that much attention to it, because there's just not the throughput to
Right.
devote a lot of resources
No,
to
and
it.
they normally will get, I think you're right, I think normally all they do is they get the tax exempts from governments, from localities, that
Right.
maybe a Davenport or somebody will put out a bid.
Yep,
But it's very rare that you get the bid on a nonprofit,
right,
and really mostly it's your clients.
mhm,
But sometimes, you know, I'm not sure from a banking perspective, you know, it might be better to keep the, 'cause, you know, the commercial rate might be more.
well, I mean, you don't ultimately
Yeah.
want to do the right thing by the
Yeah.
customer.
Right, all right.
And so
Right.
I think you would be compelled to want to do it. I think it's just a matter of, it doesn't pop its head that much, so no one, it's sort of like specialized SBA lending, you know?
Yeah, right, it
When
has
you
to be a
only
certain,
do 3 a year or something, you don't devote resources to SBA lending that much. It's just a function of what our market is. But
absolutely.
I think it's probably worth, I could hook you up with the
Okay,
VBA.
Yeah,
and
no, I-
They're always looking for stuff, especially to help their banks across the state.
and we can put a little link to the EDA.
The
Yeah,
link has
right at the
to be
bottom.
EDA.
Yeah, right.
Yes, EDA.
Brought to you
That
by,
you click on it, automatically goes to us.
All right, thank you very much, I appreciate your helping.
Dan, you were talking about proximity. Are we looking at maybe a radius of 50 or 75 miles? Fredericksburg down to Newport News?
I think that's right.
area?
I think anything in this 95 corridor to 64 works. Yeah.
Good, thank you so much. Any other questions?
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks. Michael, if you're up next.
No,
Financial
I'm
status.
sorry, financial status. We started there.
Well, you have the written report before you. You know, we've got two accounts. A basic checking account has right now currently ending balance of $18,326.31. And you can see the credits and debits there. The community partnership CD currently has a balance of $64,153.43. And, you know, all of those monies have accumulated over the years from the 1/8 to 1% bond fees that the EDA collects. So,
We have
administrative
some
fees.
coming in November.
Yes, there will be, the Williamsburg Landing comes in November, and then James Berry Robinson comes in December.
so the 25,998 is the total for 2021.
Currently, yes.
Gotcha. All right.
Correct.
Okay.
Unless Dan can find some additional financing for us.
I am sure Dan can. All right, that's good. Thank you very
All right.
much.
Don, thanks.
I'll ask him when I see him.
Okay. So now we'll go on to old business.
Now that you're ready for that, I'm gonna request a recess.
Okay. Let's have a 5-minute recess.
Oh, we weren't joking, okay.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Well, I should probably go.
What's that?
Do you need me anymore?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. No.
Thank you.
It's always good to see you, Dan.
Thank you very much.
think
Nice.
everybody's back. Let's call the meeting back in order.
Sounds good.
And we're going to have our mathematical genius,
One of my
Michael
geniuses.
Laws, give us the
Okay.
weighted average for the criteria. Thank you.
Yeah. This was just an approach I came up with, and you guys, it's open for question, open for discussion, just so that everybody's on the same page. Going to the first page, don't even look at it. It's just math. It's a nightmare math, so, but it's the basis behind the way we did this, or I did this. What it does, it offers a weighted assessment to what we accepted as a criteria of what's most important to us. Then it also offers an evaluation of each individual requester for grant money against that criteria. So what it does, it collocates what we think is important to us. By the way, thanks, Crystal. For actually funding grant requests. So going to the second page, did somebody say something? Okay, going to the second page, basically, what this is it's, if you were to add up the scores of the individual, I think this is the weighted average. Let me make sure. I'm gonna have to excuse me. I put this together real quick, so. Forget the second page. Go to the next page. What we did on the one that says member input, what I did, I took the input from each individual member, and I just talked to Sam a little while ago, and I don't have his input, so I'll have to get that from him. But what I want you to do is take a look at the numbers that I think that you gave to me and see if I got that correct. But what that does, it takes a look at how each individual member assessed the importance as they saw the individual criteria.
Okay, so what you're saying is that, for instance, number one here, the award needs to be cashed and used within 6 months from the grant issues.
Uh-huh.
All right, so then, you know, the top row of numbers there, the average of those top row of numbers becomes 7.33.
Comes 7.33.
Is that a regular average or is that a weighted average?
That is that's just a weighted average, a normal average.
It's a regular average.
It's a regular average. You take all the numbers, add them up, and divide
Divided
it by
by-
the total number of inputs.
Okay, all right, so that's a regular average. So
Okay.
that is not the weighted average.
That is not the weighted
Okay,
average.
all right, gotcha.
Okay? So if you have any questions on the input that I captured from you or got from you, we'll take
No.
another look at it. But what this also does is it allows the board to go back at any time there's a change out in membership to actually go back and reassess the input on what's important to that new member, old member, or the group coalition of membership. So, based on the criteria. And also, it allows you to change the criteria, so you can actually put new criteria in and reweight that as well. So, but it kind of locks in a method of actually defining what's important to the board and how the money is distributed.
So did we make a decision on the average or the weighted average? Or just on the?
Yes. We'll get to
That's
that.
okay, all right.
I'd like to just say one thing. On number 4, the 50% matching funds, I think 4 out of 6 had it as a 10,
Yeah.
and I had it as a 1. And I get it now, so I could easily change my 1 to
You can easily
an 8
change
or
your,
9
yeah,
or 10.
yeah, right now, we're still in the learning stages of this, so if, if you see something that you want to readdress, we can do that.
Because I think 50% matching, we've all agreed, the applicant should have at least that much. So I can easily change that, and that would give that more weight there. Let's see.
Michael, can I ask a question on that page?
Uh-huh.
Is the intent on the bottom part, award percentages, that depending on the score, that we would, like, say, under A, we'd only award 90 to 100% if the score was in that range? I mean, are we locking it down?
That is a method of doing it, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But that,
That was the
that would-
intent That was the projection, that was a suggestion that I threw out.
Okay.
That if everybody thinks that they're doing great relative to the criteria that we've assessed based on our weighted averages, yes, you would get, if they score anywhere from 90 to, well, I kind of did it a little differently. Anything between 90 to 100%, they got the full 100% because
Right.
nobody's going to get 100% at all times. So
Yeah.
that would limit it. Or you can go in and actually base it on if they got a score of 92, then you give 92%. So this is all up for discussion. This is nothing fixed
Gotcha.
or criteria that I said, this is the way
Yeah.
we're going to do it, so.
I like the idea of scoring. I personally would rather the award percentage be more judgmental by the board. You know, I wouldn't want to lock that.
Say it again?
I like the idea of scoring the request, but I don't like, for instance, say if the score is between 54 and 67, that we would feel constrained to only offer 80 to 89% of the request based on a model. I think judgmentally, we should go, it's a low score, either we don't give, we give
Okay.
50%, but I think I'd rather keep that more qualitative than quantitative, personally.
Okay. It's all an approach. So,
And I guess the second question I have, Michael, is just logistics. Like today, let's use Clay. We have a request, and we defer the decision later in the meeting. How do we even produce this in an approximate time frame to be able to make the decision at
that's
the
the
same meeting?
logistics that we're going to have to work out.
Okay.
Because as you'll see further down in this presentation, that form that was handed out in the last meeting
Mhm.
was to have been completed at that point. And somewhere along the line, we'll have to say, how do we gain input, assess the input with a final number and say this is the award, all within the time frame of a meeting?
Right.
Or, so the logistics of that have to work out. The spreadsheet is here.
Right.
I've actually built the spreadsheet at home so you can put the numbers in. But do I sit here at this meeting and do it, or does someone else from somewhere else collect these and say, this is the final score that we came up with based on the input?
Gotcha.
So that type of logistic will have to be worked out.
Right, and that is a little bit of a question, right? Because of the fact that, we have a presentation, or we have a form, but then in addition to that, we also have them coming in and doing a presentation available for questions and so on and so forth. And that will certainly impact potentially some of the scoring in the final
Yeah.
assessment.
Yeah, I mean, it'll come to pass and it'll change the way we do business
Yeah.
currently.
Yep.
So just keep that in mind. It's an approach.
Okay.
And based on that, we go to the next page, the presentation input and evaluation. That's where you would actually assess each individual presenter or requester. You'd put your name, the date of the presentation, and the company name. That's being, say it's the Sail and Surf Adventures, you put them in, and based on their presentation, as they're going through their presentation, you would evaluate them against each one. You give them a letter grade, and then somewhere within that letter grade, you give them a number. And that number would, if it's an A, of course, it's somewhere, you give them somewhere between a 90 and 100. If it's a C, of course, it's somewhere between 70 and 79. So, and then you can put your own notes on why you did it, or if you want to just keep a note, just to remind yourself, or however you want to do it. So, this would be the input format, or the input form for the team evaluation. Each individual member would actually fill this out for each individual requester of funds.
I think we need to have at potentially, the next meeting is going to be January, so that's going to be one of the grant request meetings. But I do think we need to have a couple of trial and errors on these. I think we need to kind
I
of,
fully agree. And it's going to be more of the flow, the process of how we make this work.
yeah.
Any questions on that page so far? Because I passed these out in the last meeting. I think I only got a couple of inputs back, so I saw some confusion. But this is the main thing that you want to focus on, because when a company comes up to present their request for funds, this is where you want to be. It's basically the criteria that we've allotted as important to us as the committee. and you're assessing them against the individual criteria.
Yeah, I must say, I'm a little confused on the fact that you have the EDA member grade A, B, C, D, and then you have the EDA member numerical grade 1 to 100. Now, does the EDA member numerical grade 1 to 100, does that need to be 90 in order for you to give them an A?
Yes,
So you give
lower
them
than
a,
90 to give them an A.
Right,
You
so
give an
you-
A, you need to give them a 90, minimum.
right, so you basically give them the numerical grade first, and then what you do then is
Just give them,
then you basically give them A, B, C, D.
Exactly.
After. So then what's the purpose of the A, B, C, D?
I think somewhere in my Excel spreadsheet, I use that number.
Okay, all right.
Otherwise, I get to determine what an A is, whether it's a 90 or
Okay.
100, which changes the average. So to keep this
Right,
as
but you have the little,
independent,
you have the little score down there, 90 to 100 EBNA, but so anything above a 90, I would have to at least give them a 90
yes.
for it to be an A. So,
Exactly.
okay, all right, gotcha.
Because
So you-
anything above that becomes, I'm trying to keep this as quantitative as possible. That way
Yep.
we can keep this to a concept that says, this is how we got there.
All right, okay. As I said, I think we need some mock examples just to kind of go through this and maybe a working session, just to kind of like work through it and make sure that everybody's comfortable and we don't have any
I think
confusion.
that'd be great, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I think from my perspective, Michael, like, at the bank, we have like loan risk grading systems that is multi-parameter and all that stuff, and presumably when you set it up, it captures everything, but we just use that as a guide. We will, we'll say, it'll give you a point estimate, and you go, that's right or wrong, that's not right for blankety blank reason or something like. I think it's a great guide to help us in our decisioning, but in and of itself should not be, in my opinion, like, for instance, like that number 9. If somebody comes in and they don't have a realistic business plan, that's like a non-starter for me. That's like an automatic no, just on that one, probably. But I would like to, if they don't have a realistic business plan and they're just coming in asking for money without a way to utilize it, I'm like, regardless of how it scores on the other 9 criteria, I'm like, this is a stretch. That's the way my mind works. So I think I like using it as a guide, but not going, oh, they passed this threshold, we award this grant. That's just me.
as part of that discussion you just brought up, that's where the individual weights come in. If that's where you feel strongly about that, you give that a 10.
Right.
If someone else says, okay, business plan may be not as important because there's other criteria, they could give it a 4.
Yeah, but like in that case, for me, like regardless of what weight I gave that, let me see what weight I gave it, make sure I'm consistent with what I'm saying. Realistic business plan in place, I gave it a 5. But like, for me, that criteria almost in itself is don't pass square one. It is like a deal killer. That just, regardless of what weight I gave it, if somebody doesn't have a realistic business plan, more likely than not, I'm gonna go, what, almost, why are you coming to us?
But then the question is too, the question that comes into my head when you say that, because I agree with you,
Mhm.
but what is realistic?
Mhm.
I mean, realistic in your mind might be different than what is realistic in my mind
Exactly.
and the third ones, right?
Right.
So that becomes a little bit fluid. I think when it comes to these things and these criteria, they're going to be most helpful when we have, and I hope that we have, numerous applicants and we kind of have to kind of compare them to each other.
Right.
And that's where that fine tuning kind of thing is going to be. Because, if you only have one and you're like, well, he has a realistic business plan, but this other thing is a little bit shaky. I mean, you can be a little bit more subjective.
Mhm.
But when it comes to comparing two applicants, I think you need to be
Oh, I get it.
having
I get
a
it.
little bit more.
No, I'm in the numbers business, but I guess my caveat would be, having done this sort of thing with lending, which these grant requests are just like loan requests.
Right.
It is hard to capture all the qualitative aspects of a request that
Sure.
you can rely totally on a numerical model. That is my experience. So very helpful, tries to keep the process as objective as possible. But at the end of the day, it is maybe a major input, but it's just one input into the decisioning on a request.
Yeah, and I also think that if we're gonna be, and I hopefully, we will continue to do that, be very transparent, and the people that we award, make awards to, and share that, continue sharing that on the website, and maybe even kind of like in an article in the
Mhm.
Rappahannock Record, as we
Mhm.
talked about before. We have to make sure that it is clear that we have these criteria, and, how we score, that we score people, because the more visibility we get out there, the more people are gonna ask, well, why did A get it versus B? So it's good to have it, and it's good to have it documented, I think.
Mhm.
Anyway.
And another thing too is, if that's a criteria that you feel that strongly about, we can put that criteria in a separate category. This is very dynamic. It's
Mhm.
nothing fixed.
Right.
So, however you want to approach that is up for vote, I guess, on the board, or however you want to make it work.
Yeah, I think to me, the way to approach it is just to use this as a major quantitative input into what ultimately is a subjective qualitative decision by the board. I don't think we need to, I think the model's really good. I don't think we need to tinker with the model and all that stuff. I just think we need to take it for what it is as one component, probably a primary component in our decision-making, that we're not just winging it, that we're being objective about it, but we just don't say, oh, it's got this score, we approve it. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and I agree with Jeff, and I think this has been very important. It's opened our eyes to criteria that we really didn't talk about previously in a lot of these grant requests. Now we have a guideline of 10 different criteria that we can judge the businesses on. And, that's very, very helpful.
Yeah, it's just that when I came on board, it's just looking at it from a newness perspective. Everybody mentioned the criteria was why we gave money out.
Right.
And just a couple of meetings I've been in,
Yeah.
the criteria wasn't the basis for it. It was
Yeah.
more of a subjective approach as opposed to that. So if the criteria is a minute part of it, I'm almost under the impression of why do we have it? So,
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like being a growth process, right? I mean, it took a while to get any criteria in place.
Yeah.
Remember, we didn't have anything to start off with, and so this is kind of like step 2, that we actually are using the criteria and actually scoring against it, because we just had them there as a kind of a reminder to start off with. And now with your system, we're gonna actually be able to score against it, so, which I think is great.
So what I'm hearing, I think, from the board is that, previously we would just discuss the grants in open discussion. Now we have criteria that we can discuss amongst ourselves during a grant request. What do we think about this? What do we think about that? And then make our decision instead of trying to write down numbers and come to a final score and everything. I think this gives us a basis for making the decision at the meetings without having to take a lot of time and actually write down, a 5 or an 8 or a 10 or whatever, and give them a final score, and then discuss it among ourselves and make the resolution or the motion to approve or not approve a certain amount of money. And so I think this gives us a really good basis,
Okay,
which
yeah.
we didn't really have before.
okay.
Is that what?
Yeah, I think it's essential that we develop some sort of plan for making decisions now that we've opened it up to grants for businesses other than nonprofits and such, which we didn't used to do more of. So I think that's a great idea. But I like the subjective aspects as well as to, you can tell a lot about how successful somebody might be just by how they present themselves and how they even present for the grant. And I think that's just up to us as individuals to decide whether this person has those strengths or not, because somebody may not be able to put out a really good business plan, but may have a work ethic that would overcome that. And I think that's something that you really need to take. For example, when I first looked at the Northern Neck Fitness business plan, I picked it up and said, wow, this is really impressive. But as I read through it, I realized it looked like to me it was a boilerplate business plan that the names had been plugged into. And so it wasn't nearly as impressive as maybe the guy who's written out a few numbers on a piece of paper by hand and small business just getting started by himself. So those are two totally different ideas of business plans. The idea of the business plan is to figure out, is this thing really gonna work or not? You know, so I think there are lots of different aspects, and each one of us is gonna have to decide which one is the most important when we decide whether we're gonna vote for it or not.
Yeah, I think you touched on a good point. Most of the businesses, I think, that are coming to us, very small business, 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4 people. This is not a manufacturing company that's coming to us, so they're going to employ 30 to 100 people. And small business people starting out, sometimes they don't have a business plan. It's in their head.
Right.
And through hard work and everything else. So we can sort of judge, I think, some of the aspects of what they brought to us and say, well, this plan sounds like it would be good, or what they presented and their background, and award based on that, plus the criteria that we've gone over. That's what I think this is so helpful.
Very helpful.
Yeah, because we're not swinging for the fences. I mean, we're, doubles and singles is what builds the community. What is the percentage? Jeff, 80% of the businesses in the country, small business, something like that?
Yeah, it's really numerically,
Yeah.
not based on employment, but numerically, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's also having a criteria on there, having the criteria on the website, and listing the different areas of importance when it comes to what the businesses are gonna be scored against. It might actually give the small business an impetus to develop a business plan, because many don't necessarily think in that area or think in that direction. So it's helpful for the business itself just to sit down and say, hey, how am I gonna make money here? Am I gonna make money here? I mean, that's a lot of times the question to ask as well.
So on the grant request form that we've revised, are all these criteria now on it, or should we
I think they
incorporate
all,
some of these criteria
hang on
on
a
the
second.
grant request form that comes to the county? So that small businesses know when they come here what we're looking for and trying to help.
This is just a copy of, I don't know where it came from, but when I came on board,
I
this was the
sent it to you.
criteria that was
hang on,
supplied.
yeah.
Could this sheet just be the second page to the grant application or third page?
Something towards that?
I think
Well, one of the items is already on there, that will it be spent within 6 months? That's a yes or no question on the
Yeah.
application.
because I think the criteria is definitely listed, and the updated criteria is definitely listed.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it can't be updated again, but,
Right.
let's see if I
You-
can find it.
Does it make sense to, each of us filled these out in our own little world without the benefit of discussion among other committee members. And like Roy, I circled yours, the award needs to be cashed within 6 months. Everyone has really high scores except Taryn and I. I think, maybe us,
So, this was updated May 18th.
yeah.
The grant request criteria, so it might need to be updated again, but this is what it looks like right now.
Okay.
Yes, you can take a look, and that's on the website. I don't know, Roy, if you want to take a look?
But I think maybe the benefit of the discussion around our weighting of the criteria might pull that dispersion in a little bit. I think, I don't know, for the most part, a lot of them are pretty close, but like the 50% matching, Roy already pointed out, there's 1, 5, 1, 1, and everyone else is a 10. So that one drives that number down, whereas
Absolutely.
with the
Yeah.
benefit of group discussion, we might go, oh, I'd like to change my number.
Yeah,
I was
and
sitting there
that's-
filling out a form.
Yeah, and that's part of where, this whole concept is up for discussion.
Yeah.
It's just a boilerplate concept.
Right,
Right.
What alters or changes is a group
Right.
dynamics discussion.
right.
And so if we go through one criteria and everybody says, well, that should not be that
Right.
low, based on that.
Right.
Because each one of these was they were each done in a vacuum.
Right,
Essentially, everybody went home and says, well, that's important to me based on the, you know, the eggs that are frying in this kitchen right now.
Right, right.
So if you could come up, you know, if you want to have a discussion, that's a whole different story.
Yeah, and I mean, this was before Michael came up with a scoring system. So once we have now, we can just, I mean, it's easy just to update the criteria
Okay.
on the website.
So is the
and-
next step, I guess I'm gonna know where the next step's going, is do we wanna, number one, redo the criteria to this, the May 18th list?
No, the May 18th, it needs to be updated to have yours, because that's what
Oh,
the May
okay.
18th is.
So,
And I think as Roy said, most of them are on there. There might be, we might need to word them or change the order of them or whatever, but that's what's on the EDA website right now.
okay, so this needs to be updated to,
But I don't know, we need to verify it if it
Okay.
needs to be updated.
okay,
Yeah.
we know as a group, so that when I do this, everybody's saying the same thing, that the website and this list of criteria are different right now? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, they're pretty much similar, actually.
They're similar, but as I said, this was updated May 18th.
Okay,
For the July 15th meeting, you developed this system,
right.
which you have been tweaking on.
So we
we
want
need
to
to
change
kind
this
of.
to that? on the
No, we
website?
need to update the May 18th to mimic what you have been developing,
Okay,
right? So whether that is the wording or whatever it is, we just need to make sure that they are the same.
okay. So
They're very similar as it is right now, but just make sure that they are the
right,
same.
okay. So,
One thing I noticed, if you take a look at the member input, I mean, obviously there, I can't remember exactly what the instructions were at the time, but if you look at Roy's response, he's taken all of the numbers from 1 to 10 and distributed them through
Right.
the
You order-
criteria.
You order ranked.
Other people
I didn't order.
have used the same number for two different ones, so I'm not so sure that maybe we should just redo this. I mean, I don't know, Roy, when you filled it out, did you say each of the criteria deserved one number and then that number was gone and you couldn't use that number again?
No,
You didn't?
no, just,
Okay.
it was random.
Okay.
Wow.
But as
Because
I
you've
said,
got,
you know,
you've got
number,
every number filled out from 1 to 10, and
Works
see,
out that way. Yeah.
I've got 2 sevens,
that was not a plan.
Michael's got
Yeah.
2 tens.
I got a bunch of sixes.
I mean, you know, it's just,
Yeah. No, that was just happenstance.
okay.
But as I said, number 4, I can easily change my response to that. And I was doing that as a personal thing, because when I started my business, I didn't have a penny to rub together.
Mhm.
So I didn't have any money, but I had a plan, and, you know, a lot of small people, business people have a plan and work hard and
Those of us
and
who
either make it or not.
started small
Exactly the
businesses
same.
from scratch,
Exactly.
might think that 50%
Jobs created.
was imposible to
Yeah.
achieve.
And that's a high
150 and the
match.
business kind
Yeah,
of,
so, I mean,
There you go.
that's why I
Yeah.
should
Bless you,
consider
sorry.
it was a very high priority.
Sure,
They are-
depending on the amount that you have to put in to start.
they're indented, see, on the 6th.
Like in that
You
case,
have
my
them
plan
out
was,
here.
I wanted a match.
Right, they're indented.
It was not- I did
Otherwise,
not
so you
put
have
weight in
10 and this is
50%.
8.
Right.
I wanted
So we're not
some.
doing that.
So
You have
I
to
don't think we need to
extend
do
Right.
that, but,
Yeah,
That's the reason I gave it a
Exactly.
5. It's the middle,
Right.
middle.
okay. So it
So-
doesn't look like the criteria on the website needs to be updated.
Mhm.
It's the same.
So I
as-
think that's the consensus, that we
Yeah.
update the criteria from the May update that you had and add the other inputs here.
But they are the same.
they are
They are
the
the
same.
We
same.
just looked at them.
Just
They're
look
the
at
Okay,
it.
same.
they're the same.
So,
Yeah.
so that action item's off the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless we want to, because there's two criteria that is kind of not, what is it called? Indented under number 6 here, updated criteria, so jobs created, jobs saved, improved business climate. Under that bullet, the bullet 6 here, I have listed 1 FTE created award per awardee and business climate improvement, whereas Michael had broken it out. So in his list, it says 10, on this one, it says 8, because under number 6, we have kind of grouped 2 of the criteria, if that makes sense. But from a wording perspective, they're the same.
Okay.
Okay.
So I don't really see a need to update them unless anybody else does.
And I'll take another look at them, and if they
Okay.
need change.
All right.
So
Good.
the-
Well, based on what we've gone through, should we move to the next agenda item?
Well,
And
next agenda item.
and maybe we could put some of this to work on that.
Well, I guess I had a couple questions on this.
Oh, please, yeah.
Before we take off on this. Where do we go from here?
Well, we
I
have-
guess I'm not too sure if we, are we gonna, I mean, are we reevaluating the inputs, like you wanted to change yours to a 4, on one of the criteria? I mean, where do we go from here?
Well, I think.
I guess I'm confused.
From what I've heard, discussion, I think that we use the criteria that you have. I don't know that the member input, I mean, I said I wanted to change that because I get where we're all coming from on that. But if we're going to give a grant request, we go through the criteria verbally at the meeting. We look at it, discuss it, and then award the grant, and not sit there and start writing down numbers and adding things
So
together and
yeah,
taking
so
a lot of
so
time.
the inputs really don't matter, I guess, at the end of the day, is from what you just said.
Well, no, the
I mean, it's the same, essentially what we're doing is using the same criteria that we've
Right.
always had as a discussion point. The inputs that you have, that were given as a support to this really don't mean anything, so the whole weighted average concept doesn't flow.
Well, it does, but do we have to actually put that down
We can do
in
yeah.
numbers for each one? And
I-
when I
I
say
do
it does,
think we
it's
do.
because of our discussion, and that way we will know how the board feels. Is the board discussion the weighted average, basically, when they come to us, to some
No,
degree?
no, I don't think a board discussion is a quantitative weighted average, and this allows us to do that. And to the point that I made to Jeff, I think it's very important to have the scored, in other words, the numbers, when it comes to comparing two applicants that might be close.
Mhm.
So I do think it's very important to do the scored criteria. Now, to Jeff's point as well, it doesn't mean that we cannot deviate from that through a discussion. So I think what we need to do is that we need to have the scored average when we come into a grant request assessment, to have that with us, and then use that as a starting point when we're having the discussions and the decisions afterwards. Where we go from here is that I think we need to have a trial run. We need to do a workshop and we can certainly do this virtually. It doesn't have to be an official EDA meeting, unless, I don't know how you do that, but you help us out with that, Don. And because we need to have a working session where we're really not making any decisions. It's a training session for how we're gonna be able to do this, going forward. So that's where I think we go
But if we have
from
more than
there.
3 people at a meeting, then it's a formal meeting,
Yeah.
and it has to be advertised. That's in
Even
the
if it's a
bylaw.
training session.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
correct, yeah.
fine.
From the outside looking in, this is what I see. I see this sheet right here going to the EDA members with the grant request when they come in. You all filling out this sheet on your own after reviewing the grant request
Right.
on your time,
Absolutely.
Before we get here.
before you
Yep,
get here.
Yes,
Absolutely.
I agree with that.
Bring this sheet with you to the meeting, and, maybe something is said during the discussion, during the presentation that changes your mind. But getting back to what Jeff said earlier, the ultimate decision, I think, is somewhat subjective, because based on the things that Bruce said, that, maybe the work ethic is, that about stands out more than a business plan that's shown. Now, that doesn't give you a number, but I don't know that a number is needed. I don't think I've heard from the majority of the board that a number is needed to make a final award. That's kind of what I'm hearing. So I don't know how much further you need to go besides this sheet right here.
Except that it needs to be filled out consistently and, among all the members.
Yeah,
Because
but
we
I
can't
think,
have different people filling out differently, then it's.
yeah, but I think you all can do this when you review the
Yep.
grant application on your own time.
Yep, I agree completely. I think that would be a very
That's-
good idea.
That's
Then you have
what,
a basis for your discussion.
yeah.
You have a numerical, quantitative type of assessment of that grant request. Now, as Dawn is saying, upon discussion or presentation, That might change a little bit, but there's still gonna be some type of record of how that was assessed among the different members, which I think is valuable.
I mean, one of the things I was looking at was down the road, if we get questioned
Yeah,
about the
absolutely.
award.
Yep.
How do we say this is, we got this criteria, but do we evaluate on this subjective concept? How do we employ a defense against that attack? So by having this as the mainstay as opposed to a subjective approach, you've got something that says, I know what I'm doing, or this is why I did it.
I
If
agree.
someone questions why one business got something.
While one business
another one
got
didn't.
something and another
Right.
one didn't, as opposed to, that's why this to me, and I'm not advocating it, I'm just suggesting it, would have, using the term, a more of a heavier weight than a subjective approach.
Right, however, during a discussion, it could be something that came up, and you said, well, based on what I heard from this presentation, which was not in the written grant application, my scoring, and you can make a note of that or whatever. It's just basic documentation, really, about what we're doing.
Okay.
So yeah,
So based on that, were we redoing inputs?
no, I don't think we're
Just
redoing the
just
inputs that we
Using
have
the
been
form and
doing.
just filling it out, or?
Yeah, for the next
Yeah.
grant request, we're gonna be doing that and filling out the form. And
Okay.
we'll see,
And
if
those,
we need any.
and the process flow of these forms, where do they go to get averaged, or where, are they just brought, I'm confused, where do the forms go at the end of the day?
I would think we would, for our
They go to
meeting,
you.
want to have that EDA team roll up. So coming into the discussion of the request, we should know what everyone's individual
Yeah,
score was when
okay,
they're
good.
scored it.
That'll work.
And that'd be the basis of discussion when we're approving or disapproving a request.
Okay.
That'd be a starting point.
I think so.
Let's give it a try run.
Yeah.
See how it
It's-
works.
I wouldn't mind changing
Yeah.
some of my inputs after having
After-
discussed it with everybody, but
Yeah, and-
I'm fine.
And for the audience that's here, for Sharon, and also Sam, you're a newer member, one of the reasons we're going through this exercise is because in the past, the EDA board used to give grants to a lot of nonprofits, 501c3s. And we have sort of changed that direction over the last just the last 2 years. We're looking at new businesses and entrepreneurship and not giving the same grants to the same people every single year. So that's one of the reasons we need to get the criteria, because we're looking at, new and individual businesses that are coming in.
So just to summarize, I think with the grant request, you all get a copy of this, and you all will fill that out ahead of time.
Yep.
Then, when we go into closed meeting for you all to discuss, we'll compile them under this EDA team roll-up,
Right.
and you all decide on what your grant is from that. I think that's,
Yeah, if you send the inputs to me for this trial run, I'll be glad to throw them in an Excel spreadsheet and come up with the numbers.
No, I think.
I mean,
makes
just
sense
as a
to me.
trial, and if you guys want to pick something that we've already done, that's okay too. We don't have to wait until the next meeting and, go helter-skelter on how this works. We can pick somebody that's already been awarded money, or someone that's about to be, or,
Yeah,
Well, we
no,
have a grant request that's going to be in front of us in just a minute.
okay.
So we want to try to plug in
Sure,
some
I mean,
numbers to this.
if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I mean, we'll just go for it.
Go for
Okay. Michael, thanks for all the
Sure.
Yeah,
work.
thank you.
That first equation sort of threw me, and I hope there wasn't a pop quiz on that. So we do have, Don, I don't have the particulars of going into the private session.
I've got it.
If you could read that for us.
Yeah, we just need someone to say so move after I read this. That the Lancaster County Economic Development Authority enter into a closed meeting for grant requests per section 2.2-3711.A.6 of the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended for the specific discussion or consideration of the investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved and where, if made public, the financial interests of the governmental unit would be adversely affected.
So moved.
All right. So you all take a vote on that?
So we take a vote on that, and then we go into closed
Yeah,
session?
Yeah, just say, all those in favor?
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
You're now in closed
opposed?
meeting. Glenn,
open meeting, we've had a discussion about sale and surf. I'd like to hear if there's a, they have an application for $10,000. I'd like to hear if there's any motion on the floor.
I motion that we award him the full amount.
I'd second that.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, we've had a motion, it's been seconded. All in favor, make known by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Next agenda item, let's move on.
Let the minutes reflect that I did not vote.
Okay.
Yeah, true. Abstention.
So the next item, approval of the July 15th, 2021 meeting, the minutes.
I'd move approval.
Okay, we have
I
a,
second that.
okay, all in favor say aye.
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 All right. Is there any other business? Being no other business, I'll call for adjournment.
Are you going to set the meeting date, January,
Yes,
Thursday,
the
January
next-
20th at 8:30?
What
Next
is it,
EDA
January?
Thursday, January the 20th, 2022, at 8:30, right here.
Yes. I would, just to add, that meeting in January, I believe, is when you elect officers for the year. I would like for you all to elect a secretary from within your board. Currently, Crystal takes care of the minutes for every board and commission that meets in the county. And I'm trying to take a little bit off of that plate. I mean, her primary responsibility is clerk to the Board of Supervisors, so that's, I know the Broadband Authority elects a secretary from their board, so just be thinking about this for your January meeting. I'd like for you to elect a secretary from within your membership.
Good idea.
Or the new EDA assistant.
If
you've
it's in
got
place
somebody.
at that time, that person will take my spot.
All right, good. Okay, I'd like to adjourn the meeting, and
So moved.
so moved.
Sounds good.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I know you gotta get.